Yeah, so really good movie, and very related to computer science. It's the story of the group of it's Alan Turing. So you've heard of Turing machines? Maybe you talked about it in 150 or something like that. So he is a famous computer sciencey guy. He was a mathematician, actually. But this is the story of him and the group of people. They were hired as code breakers. So in here we recently talked about ROT13, right? Mm-hmm. Cryptography stuff. And so these were the code breakers who broke the Enigma machine. If you aren't familiar with the Enigma machine, it's the encryption machine that the Germans used during World War II. And it was a moving target. So, depending on the day and stuff, you had a different code for the day. So all their information was being sent encoded using Enigma, where only you had to have the machine plus a document that you used to plug in like that day's code into the machine to decode information. And this group are the ones who decoded the thing, which then allowed them to start intercepting messages about what the Germans' movements were about to be. So it likely changed the war. So really, really interesting story from a computer science perspective. Plus, it's kind of almost a biography of Alan Turing, who's a pretty important person in computer science, but a pretty flawed individual too. If you're available tonight, I would highly recommend. I'm gonna come to it. I'll be there. So, and Mr. Gonzalez will of course be there. He's petitioned the president of the university for special dispensation for bringing alcohol on campus, but I'm fairly certain that's not going to fly. Mr. Gonzalez says they could try to lock him up. The bars aren't close enough together to hold him. Probably do a padded room or something. I don't think that'll work either. He puts all of his clothes on feet first because his head's a lot bigger than the rest of his body. So most of his sweaters and stuff, his head wouldn't fit through the head hole, but his legs and body do. So he goes feet first into those things. It's very Mr. Gonzalez is very unorthodox. Yeah, so highly encourage you. I think they're going to have some snacks and stuff. I don't know what they're having food wise, but if you are around or aren't doing anything, let's say important, I highly encourage you to come and watch that movie. It is a good one, and very related to your majors. No extra credit for it, but I suppose I could I could force the issue. I could say, well, you have two options for Thursday. You can either implement merge sort or show up to Imitation Game. Then people like have a work schedule tonight, start giving me death threats, and my tires are slashed. And like, it's not that I didn't want to come see the movie. I couldn't come see the movie. Now I got to do merge sort. And then you got to throw the caveat on there that, extra credit tokens can't be used for merge sort.
Oh, my God.
It's like, that's fine. I'll just take the 0. It's worth it. Oh, I'm totally thinking about that right now.
Oh, my God.
I won't give you merge sort for Thursday, but I promise you will have merge sort next semester. And I also promise you won't think it's anywhere near as bad as you originally thought it was.
Yeah.
Missing 2 tokens. I thought I asked last class. Well, I thought I had all the tokens caught up. Are you lying?
No.
Are you still lying?
One.
I thought I was.
All right. But you're caught up, right?
I may be missing one. I'll send you all the
right. Message me. I thought I was all caught up. So message me that you're missing 2, and I'll go and add them in. Let's see. What am I doing? Oh.
We're still in school.
Is-
last Tuesday, I'll run the classes.
yeah, don't you wish the semester was longer?
No.
Yeah, kind of. Like, I'm not ready to be over.
Yeah.
I have to go home and stuff now.
Wouldn't it be better to have like
2 more weeks?
well, like no summer break, just year-round school,
My mom wants that.
and like take
People would be freaked out.
maybe take like I don't know 36 hours a semester.
You wouldn't lose that whole like break of memory stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, but don't shorten the major. You know, don't like let you get out of school in like 3 years instead of 4. Maybe extend school to 6 years.
That's too much.
I think people would be so freaked out.
What's this?
Is it as much as the Masters though?
Well, no, the masters will take 12 years on top of the 6.
So we want to get rid of the break and then make.
Now, just think about this. With my plan, you never actually have to start real life.
That's tempting.
Well, you technically do.
But how are you?
There are people that do that. There are like professional students that they just keep taking undergrad degrees. They live in the dorms. I mean, you know, at University of Illinois, there was this guy that was in some of my classes, and he was kind of late 40s, early 50s, something like that. And he was working on his 13th undergraduate degree. But the thing is, you have to stay in undergrad. Because as grad students, a lot of times you can't live in the dorms. They have to have like extra room for you, or you have to make a special petition. So, you know, and you also can't get student loans. There's a limit. But as an undergrad, you know, you can keep taking out student loans and you don't have to start repaying them until you've been out of school for 6 months.
Oh.
Well, if you're never out of school,
Well, they'll charge you too when you're dead and you know can't be alone.
well, yeah, I mean, you got to make some other. You can't get married. You know,
$1 million.
guys, $230 million in student loan debt. It's 108 bachelor's degrees. Eventually, he has to switch schools because he's run out of majors.
Oh, transfer.
And the thing is, you only have to meet the core. Like here, the Common Core, you only have to meet it once. Then after that, you're just taking courses in your major. So you actually finish the major in like, you know, a year and a half or something like that.
Common Core is like 4 classes.
What's this?
The year, like this year, Common Core is like half as many classes the year prior.
They dropped it.
It's so stupid.
But there's more classes now in the Common Core. Total.
I thought it was
No, they had it's on the floor.
Well, maybe it's maybe it's not just the Common Core. You have the professional core, and then you have some other made-up core, and you know, stuff like that. Because the departments had to reduce the number of credits for a major to 42. I think a lot of departments. I think we were at 45 credits for a major. So we had to drop a class from our majors. What we did is we dropped a required class and then took away electives, and so ultimately we forced more required classes and took away the minor for CS majors, something like that. So ultimately you get more CS classes, even though there's technically less courses required for the major, less credit hours. I don't know, it's a weird thing. But yeah, you only have to take the core once, so they just keep pumping out degrees. Okay, and this guy, he was actually part of the group that was petitioning a sports team that he was on, at the school to be included in the Olympics. And you are going to think that this is a made-up sport. It is not.
What's the sport?
Underwater hockey.
Ooh, that's interesting.
How does that work?
It's a sport.
Is it like water polo, but like
Underwater.
No, you are completely underwater.
like scuba gear and stuff?
I'm gonna show you here.
Yes.
This is really.
Sounds really good.
You got this little tiny.
What?
You have this little tiny stick. You see this?
What? Are you serious?
I like how
The
those ones
thing.
are reaching there.
Yeah, no, this is a thing. Okay, and they were trying to get this included in the Olympics. And I think it only got like beat out by like they were like 1 or 2 votes short. But there's all sorts of weird things in the Olympics.
That's true.
Like triple jump.
What's like like
That's stuff in high school and stuff. Though. This,
No, I get it, but who like decided? Hey, let's just see who could do this like weird triple jump the best.
yeah, triple jump small.
the guy who can do it the best.
And what about like the hurdles? Let's run down a track really, really, really fast, and then just put obstacles in your way, but you're not allowed to go around them. You got to jump them.
That sounds kind of cool.
Go fast.
But this would
Okay.
be a very unique thing.
And they don't even make it dangerous. Like, why don't they like sharpen the top of the things you got to jump over, or put spikes on them, or electrify them?
Or Ring of Fire.
I think there's a reason.
Ring of Fire, I like that.
I do know.
There's all sorts of things they can do to some of these sports to make them way more interesting. But you got the whole thing of with human ethics and what's this?
So, what does it look like when you play though? Like you just like swim down, hit the thing, swim back up, swim back down again to find the puck, and
Let's see.
Underwater hockey. Should be interesting.
Snorkel's completely underwater.
So it's also known as
It's somewhat difficult to continue watching.
How long before they run out of breath? I wouldn't see that at home.
Well, one of the other things I saw, some of them use rebreathers with like tanks. Anyway, maybe those are the serious players that stay down for 45 minutes at a clip. But otherwise, they have the snorkels, but they go underwater, so like you have to hold your breath, and when you come up, you got to blow the air out of the snorkel. Like
it's like the whale.
Like, wouldn't it just be better to just not have a snorkel when you go? Just go back down. All of a sudden, you got these like underwater hockey savants that like learn how to hold their breath for 25 minutes and stuff. I know there's like I've seen guys on TV that like can put themselves in sort of like deep meditative state. They stay underwater for like a long time. I think it's longer than 25 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, you're not really
they're
staying.
Well, yeah. So I mean, if a guy not doing anything,
Like a goalie.
yeah. So why can't you go into a deep meditative state and play underwater hockey at the same time? These are just the what if questions that they need to have like a Discovery documentary on. It's like sleepwalking, except it's underwater hockey, and you're and you're in a meditative, unconscious state.
Months playing underwater.
Because isn't there like the thing like don't they you got the guys who do the actual yogis that are up in the mountains and stuff. They like yoga is based on that, but the real yogi, like can't these guys like I think they've done some stuff where they can like lower their body temperature to like dangerous levels just by meditating. And then one of the guys says he can levitate, and I think somebody did some sort of
David Blaine.
well, no, a yogi guy. Like he puts himself in this meditation, he starts floating. And I did some video documentary, and they were like testing it and stuff, and couldn't see how he was doing it. But so. I mean, he's unconscious, but he's floating. Is that like a skill that's like worth having?
That's what I gotta do.
Is it?
Yeah.
It'd be a cool party trick.
Well, yeah, but the demon thing, your head starts spinning around. I mean, you're not like violent at all. You're just floating. It's a nice, calm, just kind of, magic carpety thing without the magic carpet.
So what sport is it?
Well, that's not a sport. That's like a I don't know if it's I don't know if it's considered a religion or more like a way of life or something. They're called the yogis, Y-O-G-I. Yeah, they're like a special kind of monk people.
Yeah.
Yogis yoga yasta.
Oh, they do a lot of yoga.
Well, but yoga came from that, like the stuff they do there, some of their meditative stuff. But I think it's I think it's only loosely connected. I think we kind of created
Yogi.
it's not Yogi Bear. You're finding if you're looking at cartoon bears, it's a different thing.
She's not.
Next time, it's cat.
All right, so I think we're looking at how do we put things programmatically on the screen. Isn't that why I mentioned last time? I think so. Big money, big money.
Loading state. Uh-oh.
It's still loading. That's just the old thing that I canceled.
Can you actually make calls from that?
Well, you might be able to make a Wi-Fi call. Like legitimately.
That'd be kind of cool. Calling from a laptop.
All right, so so I started creating this runtime interface thing here. So what we want to do is when we go to this screen, we want to have the ability to like get things showing up on the screen completely programmatically. All right, maybe you want to have like a scrollable list of labels or stuff like that. So let's kind of look at how we can pull that off. So I'm going to start off. We haven't looked at scroll views or anything like that in here, right? No scroll views, okay. So I'm going to start with, I'm going to close some of these guys out. Leave that guy, leave that guy. Get rid of that guy. Okay. So here's my runtime interface, steely flippy thingy. I'm going to go ahead and throw my vertical linear layout in here like I usually do. All right, so I have that guy now. And I'll just show you how to create a scroll view first, and then we're going to want to fill this guy programmatically. So I'm going to go to this thing called containers over here. And one of the things in here is something called a scroll view. Okay, so what a scroll view does is, sometimes you want to have a giant list of things. Now there's other ways of accomplishing this, but you have a lot of programmatic control over doing it the way I'm going to show you. So let's say you have a big list of things that you want to be able to scroll through. Now your screen is only so big. So if you're going to put a list of stuff on the screen, you're limited to the number of things you could put on the screen by the size of your screen. But if you put it inside of a scroll view, then the scroll view can house effectively, it wouldn't actually be unlimited, but a huge, huge number of items, size of int or something like that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a scroll view. I'm going to drag it in here. Now notice that a scroll view comes with, there's something inside of it over here. You can't see it right now, but I think I have to just wiggle that guy. So scroll views have a vertical linear layout embedded within them. So things that you put inside of that vertical linear layout become part of what the scroll view manages. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw a bunch of text views in here. So I'll throw them inside that vertical linear layout. I'm just copying and pasting a whole bunch of them. All right, this guy will definitely scroll now. Okay, so notice here it has a little scrolly thing over on the side. So I just have a whole bunch of stuff that I put in there. I'm going to go ahead and run this, get me to that screen, and then I should be able to scroll. Big money, big money. All right, so I'm here, and see I can scroll. Like over here?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't mess with layout at all. So it's just, I just threw it in there and it probably laid out funny. My scroll view, I probably have to set to, yeah, its width is match parent. What's this guy's width? Oh, my linear layouts width is 368, so I would have to have this guy match constraint. It's weird. Can't I have that guy match the parent? If I just say none. Huh. I've never seen that guy. Yeah, I could stretch it all the way over to the side. It's still on the constraint layout. Why isn't this guy is inside of this, right? Yeah, it's interesting. I can put the scroll view as a child of my constraint layout, and I can make him match parent. But when I put this vertical linear layout in there, oh, now it's allowed to match parent. What if I put the scroll view back inside of that? Yeah.
So the scroll view is not supposed to be how the virtual route.
Actually, no, it's spelled differently. It doesn't have the underscore. Is it just when you typed it in?
Oh, that's from when I typed it in. Yeah.
I think it's acting like it's not.
See if I can.
It's not actually.
But it is interesting that if I have a scroll view up here under constraint layout, I get the option for match parent. Here, let me just delete my. Maybe that was just a bad vertical linear layout. I'll put another vertical linear layout in here. Yeah, that guy's allowed to match parent. I can throw this guy inside of there. Yeah, I have no explanation. Bad linear layout, vertical linear layout. Sometimes you open up a dozen eggs and a couple of them are cracked. Somewhere in the. If you buy eggs from Meijer, I've noticed that there's a really high incident of at least one cracked egg. I think they play football with those things in the back.
Seeing what goes down back there when it does.
Well, I mean, do you work there?
No, but I used to work at FoodSave, and I assume that's one similar.
Similarly, oh, do we even want to know? Like,
I
you don't want to know. You'll never eat again.
went back there once, and somebody was playing with a giant cardboard paper airplane.
Yeah, but that's okay. That's not food. That's just childish.
Well, it was like landing in the food. That's not as bad.
There's worse things that can lead to the food, I suppose.
I've seen them footballing stuff around.
All right, so we see that we can have a little scroll view, dealy flippy thing. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete all of these guys from here because what we really like to do is be able to create that programmatically. So instead of us pasting a whole bunch of stuff in there, maybe we have like a little edit text up top that we can, a button that we hit the type a number into the edit text, click the button, and it generates that many text views and puts it into our scroll view. Something like that. So kind of some moving parts. So let me go ahead and I'll put a we'll put an edit text. So
Just out of curious, if you don't have the linear layout, but you just have like the scroll view and the button into it under the constraints, so how is it gonna like make it? Is it gonna be horizontal? Or is it gonna be vertical?
The scroll view comes with a vertical linear layout.
So then, if you just throw a button without a linear layer, it's still vertical arrange.
Well, you say, okay, so if I remove this guy,
Yeah.
and I just have this guy at the top level,
Yeah.
and I throw something inside of that,
No, throw something outside under this constraint.
oh no, it won't be vertically laid out, it'll be constrained layout. So then you'd have to mess around with the constraints to say, is this at the top and center? Is this, so the constraint layout allows you to be a lot more specific about where stuff exactly is on the screen. But I'm not very good at using it, so that's why I use the vertical linear layouts, because it's easier just to get stuff to suck to the top or be on top of each other, that kind of stuff. If you want to build fancy interfaces, you can figure out how the constraint layout works. But if I come up here to the top and I throw let's just throw this edit text thing up here. So see how this guy is right here? I can move him around to very specific places based on these constraint things. Where it's going to look different on different devices depending on how good you get at creating these constraints. So I usually just throw everything into a nice vertical linear layout, and then it just works.
But then you cannot move it, right?
But
then you cannot move it if you.
Other than gravity. Yeah, I can't move it, freely throughout there, but I could suck everything to the bottom or stuff like that with gravity. So I have less control over where it goes, but I have it's a lot easier just to lay out interfaces quickly. All right, so there's my edit text. I'll put a little hint in here. Enter number of rows, something like that. We'll even set the gravity to center for no good reason other than I think it looks good when it's centered. All right, now we are going to need to be able to read in from this guy, right? So again, we're going to use MVC, so we're going to give it a name that we're going to remember. So we'll call this guy input ET. All right, because we're going to read in some number from that guy. Now we need to know when to read that number in, so we're going to throw a button in here. All right, and the button we don't have to give a name to, but we will have a function that we'll write and put into this guy's on click, right? So I'll go ahead and change the text on the button and says, let's say generate scroll view or something like that. All right, because that's what that guy does. All right, so when we click this button, what we want it to do is we want it to fill up this guy down here with a bunch of text views. We can put whatever we want in there, but for right now, let's just do text views. Okay, so now the scroll view itself is a container that has a vertical linear layout inside of it. There is a version of scroll view that also has a horizontal linear layout if you want to scroll through like this, but we're just using the vertical one. They'll work the same. Learning it this way will be the same for the horizontal one. All right. So I won't actually add things directly to the scroll view. Instead, I'll add things to our linear layout. So I need to give this guy a name. All right. So we're going to call this guy our scroll view. I'm going to put VG at the end of it. Have we talked about view groups in here?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, so we have, now remind me, what's a view?
Anything you can see on the screen.
Yeah, anything we can see on the screen. Now, a view group actually is a view. So we have this hierarchy. If I go in here, we'll just search for it with this one. Android view group. All right, so a view group, front row. Oh, here, we're fine. A view group, this is its object-oriented hierarchy. It's an object just like everything is in a object-oriented language. So at the very top of the hierarchy, a view group is a generic object. From there, it's either further broken down into something called a view, which V told us is anything we can see on the screen. I think fair enough assessment. Then we have this view group thing. So a view group, this is almost kind of organized funny because a view group is actually a collection of views. Okay, so a view group is a view so far as it follows the rules about a view. It has a layout, it has position on the screen, stuff like that, stuff that it is the same as a view would be. You know, if we think about a view, let me just click on view here real quick. You know, we haven't gone into too much detail with these things, and I don't intend to too much. I'm just gonna get or did their internet die? Was this screen our last hurrah? So okay, we got some stuff now. So let's just look at some of the stuff. I really hate this mouse, and I keep threatening to bring a normal mouse, and clearly it's not important enough to me to actually do such a thing.
Is it wireless?
This mouse? No, this is the normal trackpad.
Oh, no.
But I mean, I use my MacBook Pro all the time, and I'm like a savant with a trackpad on that. Just this one, I don't know, but my fingers are the wrong grip, or it's too sensitive, or something about this trackpad that is just not compatible with me. And I don't think it's an inability to use trackpads. I've been doing it for a couple of minutes. So but this one is, we are not friends, is what it comes down to. All right.
You should still hit the Mac.
Well, no, it's not that I don't have access to a mouse. It has everything to do with there's an effort that is required to get a secondary mouse. And I just have them laying all over the place. I have probably 6 or 7 of them in my office. Yeah, this is nothing to do with access to mice or anything like that. It's everything to do with laziness. Yeah. All right. So we have things like, we have a layout for position on the screen. We have a measurement. Let's see if I can get it to jump down a lot more without destroying my world. They can have animations associated with them. We can get the left position of it. So, really a view is, we can actually write our own kind of almost like a button thing. We could ask a button. So a button is a view, and our on click, it will be an implementation of that views is pressed function. Okay, so a view is anything we see on the screen, so it has visual components to it, possibly animation, stuff like that. But maybe more important for us, it's also it has locations, as well as a bunch of other stuff. But now when we talk about a view group, we go back here to our code. So here's a view group right here, right? The scroll view VG. I've introduced it previously to you as something called a vertical linear layout. All right. But this guy happens to be a view group, which is a collection of other views. But in and of himself, he's also a view. That is, he lives on the screen in a certain location. He has a coordinate for his upper left-hand corner. He has a width. He has a height. All these things. So he is a view, but he's a container that holds other views. That makes sense? So we can almost think of as a view as being like a single person motorcycle, where a view group is, I don't know, like a bus. Okay? They both will drive you down the street. They both look like car thingies, right? Motorcycles look a little different, but you could make a single person car. You make a single person bus, right? You just have the one driver's seat and just fill the rest of it up with like foam. This is really bad gas mileage for something that can only seat one person, but you could do it. So a view is our foam school bus, and a view group is a school bus with all the seats in it. All right. For some reason, that actually makes some sense. I think. All right, so you kind of get the weird relationships there. A view group is a view, where a view group is also a collection of views. So it is a view in that it's on the screen, it has a size, all this other stuff, but it also has space in it to hold other views and organize them, lay them out, things like that. All right, so our vertical linear layout here, I'm going to go ahead and name this guy scroll view VG. That is, it's the view group associated with our scroll view. So I can give myself access to this guy in code. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and give myself access to him, and I'm going to give myself access to our input ET. So I have access to those two different things. So I want to read in a number from input ET. Then I want to do a whole bunch of stuff and add things to my scroll view group. Okay, so we'll go into our runtime interface. I'll give myself a couple of private variables up here. So I'll say private view group, scroll view VG. I'm just naming it the same as I did before. I also have a private edit text, input ET, and then we'll go ahead and give these guys their values inside of onCreate. So I've put them at the top, which gives them a scope that will be global to this entire class, right? So I can have functions all over the place that can access our scroll view on our input ET. Technically following the rules that I've previously taught you, I probably would have said make them as local as possible. So I would have defined them in here and then only make them more global as you need them. Well, pretty much right off the bat, I'm thinking I'm going to probably need to access these guys from more than one function. So let's just make them more global now. All right, so I just kind of skipped a step. But I do need to give them values inside of onCreate because onCreate is our first opportunity to mess around with this view group thing. All right, so we'll say this dot input ET is equal to the view group version of this dot. I'm sorry, not the view group version. This is my edit text. Edit text version of this dot find view by ID r.id dot input ET. Okay. Similarly, I'll say this dot scroll view VG is equal to the view group version of this dot find view by ID r.id dot scroll view VG. All right. So everybody in here should be pretty comfortable with what we just did. Put views out on the screen. Give them names that we can identify them by. Come over here to the code. This is MVC. Create variables of those same types. Then hook those variables up to the actual things in our interface. This will be represented on the final exam. So, and we'll talk about that more on Thursday. I'll go through the slides and say this is what's important and stuff like that. But there will be Android stuff on there. So that concept of MVC will be an important concept. I could also promise you the concept of class methods versus instance methods will find its way on there again. And missing any points related to that is an instant failure of the course. It's going to take more than extra credit tokens to recover from that. It's like, how did I get a negative 1 million on the exam? It's like, I warned you. What's this? Yeah. Cockroach. Yeah, probably might. I don't want to encourage dead animals to be brought. See, I maybe didn't tell you the story before, but things like that backfired on me once. I one time made some sort of passing comment in class, like, oh, I would give extra credits, like an instant A, if somebody signed their exam in blood. Any of you, did any of you know a student named Nick Yenter? Graduated, I think, 3 years ago, but some of you might, possibly has a sibling here or something like that now, but right here, he shows up to turn his test in, pulls out a pocket knife, cuts himself, signs his exam. I had to wait for that test to dry.
Give him extra credit.
Lucky for me, he earned a very, very, very good grade in the class on his own merit. Because I would have been in a situation where I kind of promised an A. So I am in no way promising you an improved grade if you bring me a dead insect in a box, but I may look favorably upon you. Yeah, Mr. Gonzalez will be thrilled. Oh man. Some of the things I've seen in class over the years. A bunch of years ago, this was at Western Illinois University. There was like a roided up, raging football player who threw I was teaching in one room and it was down the hall. Like I don't know, he threw a desk or a chair or something at the teacher.
What?
From like the third row. So you're hearing like all these people screaming. So I run into the room and I'm like tackling this guy. I mean, he was like possessed. I mean, he wasn't with it. So he was having a bad reaction to something. Well, that's what it seemed like. Maybe he was mixing also a whole bunch of stuff and then taking some other recreational things. I don't know what he was on, but I didn't know the guy, but he wasn't acting like what a normal person acts like. He was somewhat out of control. Oh, did you see the thing in the news this last week with the Tesla car driving itself, and the guy was drunk and was passed out, was sleeping? The cops followed him for 7 miles. It was on autopilot, so the car was fine. Okay? But it kind of reminded me of like a computer science thing, actually. So one of the things that over the years has intrigued me with like video games is like bots for playing games. And one of the, so like for instance, years ago, I with World of Warcraft, I used this bot called WoW Glider, which played the game for you. But it was pretty easy to detect. Like if you saw somebody in game that might be using WoW Glider, you can see they're playing by themselves, but like, maybe you think he might be a bot. Well, there was ways you can test it by going over near him because the bot's default setting was to kind of bounce away from you, stuff like that. Yeah, so you could basically go and screw with this guy, okay, and like drag him over into like bad zones and stuff like that by just having 2 or 3 of your friends on either side kind of just bumping him along because at all times he's going to stay away from you, right? Well, the cops did that with this car. Because the autopilot, it's going to slow down when there's a car in front of you. So the cops they got this thing onto like an on-ramp. So one of the cars got in front, was slowing down to get the car to slow down. And then another cop came in from the side to kind of push it over, without touching it. Just use the car's natural sensors. And then the cop car in front just stopped. And the Tesla stopped because the car in front of him was stopped.
Is the car driving on auto down on the interstate?
Well, I mean, I think what happened is the guy was drunk, but he was with it enough to get in his car, start driving home, and put the car on autopilot. And then he fell asleep.
It's not illegal, is it?
Huh?
It's not illegal, is it?
I'm pretty sure it probably is illegal. Yeah, that's why they have the rules for all the autonomous vehicles now that you have to have your hand on the wheel. So like my car will drive on the interstate itself, but you have to keep your hand on the wheel, otherwise it starts screaming at you and stuff. So I'm guessing he just fell asleep with his hand on the wheel. But yeah, so just interesting. That kind of made me think about the whole bot thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, this really does change the way you like. Like I think self-driving cars would be really cool, right? I mean, that's the whole reason I got my recent one for driving on the interstate itself. But it changes the way we think about driving. I mean, you already you lose some of your skills, right? You don't have to pay attention as well. You're not checking your mirrors constantly because the car's just doing it all for you. Well, what happens if one of those systems malfunctions, or you're, traveling somewhere and you rent a car that doesn't have self-driving? For now, you pretty much always rent a car that has the rear camera, but I think that's another example where all cars that are made today have the camera when you're backing up. You can see the stuff. Well, so most people who have cars like that are out of practice of actually looking behind them for backing up. So now you get into some old rental car and you don't have the camera. You've lost your skill. Like, how close am I to the thing behind you? Because there's no beeps. I don't just see a picture. So kind of interesting, right?
Same thing with automatic.
Sorry, I didn't know.
What's this?
Same thing with
I'm
automatic.
just curious.
Yeah, I think that's true, but maybe that's a little bit different because there's a similarity there, but I think from a safety perspective, I think there maybe is a difference, but yeah. All right. So in any case, we should all be comfortable with this idea of having variables in here, connected to interface things out there, and MVC connecting them up, right? All right. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to create our button for our on-click button for that thing. So you should also be comfortable with this. We're going to make this guy public. Void, and let's call this guy generate scroll view group button pressed. Just be really verbose, I guess. All right. So understand that the name of this method is not important. You can name this method whatever you want to name it, but it has to be public, it has to be void, and it has to take a view as a parameter. You can name that view whatever you want. You can call this guy elephant here if you want to. But V is a nice... Called you nice. It's a nice variable name. See?
Oh my god.
Just watch it not work on the other side. It absolutely has to be called V. So let me go connect it real quick, but I think we're gonna be fine. All right, so I'll click on this guy, I'll go to his on click, and there's our function here. All right. So I've connected the button up, so now it'll call this function and do whatever that function says it should do. And then what do we want this guy to do? We want it to read in the number from input ET. So the idea is I might put a 16 in input ET, then hit that button. And what I want to do is I want to read in that 16 and then generate 16 text views and put them into our scroll view. Make sense? That's what I ultimately want to accomplish here. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get the text out of my input ET. So I'm gonna store this. I'm gonna do this in individual pieces because when I say input ET dot get text dot toString, it's coming out as a string. Okay, so I'm going to say string, we'll call it S for right now. This dot input ET dot get text dot toString. Okay, so that guy is a string. I don't want it as a string. I need it as a number. Okay, I want to squeeze the number out of that string. I know, or I'm trusting that it's going to be numeric. I happen to create my edit text over here in my interface to be of type. Keyboard type was number decimal. So it's actually only going to give me a keyboard capable of numbers. So I shouldn't be able to mess this up. So I think I should be able to safely assume it's actually numeric. But regardless, for us, we're not going to do any error checking. We're just assuming the user used our app correctly. Okay. So I have a string. Ultimately, I want, so we'll call this guy number of text views. And I want this guy to be the numeric version of what's stored in S. How do I get an integer out of a string representation of an integer? Okay, so we'll start off with his incorrect suggestion. So you want to cast it from a string to an int?
Oh, wait. I was thinking of
No, hold on. That's not a dumb suggestion. It's just incorrect. So this might be a first stab at it, right? Like, okay, well, I know I have this thing called typecasting where I can turn like a float or a double into an int, and it just cuts off the decimal point, and that works. If I have the float 3.14 and I typecast it to int, I'll get a 3. Works just fine, no problem. Okay? So it's reasonable for us to ask the question, can I typecast a string that happens to hold an integer into an int? And the answer is no. In Java, you can't. There probably actually is a language where this would work. It probably is what I would usually refer to as syntactic sugar for what we're going to ultimately end up doing, where it's kind of almost a shorthand type thing. Like, ultimately, what we want to do is we want to cast what's in S into an int. This just won't work in Java. All right. So what's another approach? So I can't typecast it. I need to somebody other than him. I know he knows the answer.
Is there a function for strings in Java?
Okay, it sounds like you're asking me a question.
I am, so I don't know.
You actually do know.
Do I?
Yeah.
We've used this before, though.
I think several times, actually.
Let's look what we've got.
And I will answer your question. I will say yes.
Where is it?
Did you say like the integer form of a character form?
Integer form of a character. Okay,
Is it
we
is it
might.
Jarad?
Charad is how you get an individual character from a string. We're trying to get a number that's stored in a string. We're trying to get something that maybe looks like 123, and we want to turn that into the number 123.
Would char number work?
Char.isNumber allows us to, well, it's not char. It's character.isNumber, and you pass it a char. It will tell us whether or not a particular character is a number. I don't think isNumber is even a thing. I think it's called isDigit.
This is the
Oh.
Visual Studio.
Yeah.
Is it .parseInt?
We're sounding real close now. Who owns that?
Integer.
Integer. Is it a class method or instance method?
That would be a class.
How do you know?
Because it's being called with an instance of the class.
Just take one word off of that. And you can call with the name of the class, right? So what I can do here is I can say integer.parseInt, and I can pass it my string. So the integer class has within it a class method, a static method called parseInt. We can go look at that. So if you want me to go to the integer class, so integer class Java. And we'll go down to parseInt in this guy. Here's parseInt. And notice it's a static method, which makes it a class method. Therefore, I call it with the name of the class in which the method was defined. This method was defined inside of a class called integer. So how do I call it? By saying integer.parseInt. I pass him a string, and what he does is he squeezes the numeric value. Now, it assumes that it does hold a number. If you say integer.parseInt and you pass it the string hello, bad things happen. It'll scream at you, and then you have the whole time travel problem and things like that. Babies cry. Okay, so presuming S is the string representation of an int, if I use the integer class to parse that integer out of a string, I will get the int version of that guy. That makes sense? Okay, and we have seen this before, have we not?
Yeah, it's familiar. Remember where?
We had to have seen this before.
I think we have. I just don't remember.
It must have been in what is it?
So we do a lot with string manipulation earlier in the semester.
I don't think we did it all. Like
I think we did use it in.
Would have been in 200 because we did Python in there.
I feel like we definitely did.
Oh, it's not Eclipse.
Well, yeah, it's Java.
Yeah.
And this is Java.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when we were in Eclipse doing.
It was like first.
Okay, so when we were in Eclipse doing string manipulation stuff, we would have squeezed integers out of strings. Yeah. Yeah, this is, just to clarify, this is not an Android thing. That's a Java thing. The Java language has an integer class that has a parseInt method that allows us to squeeze ints out of strings. Okay? So if you didn't have it in your notes before, we'll throw that in there now. This is an important thing. You're going to use this for a while. Well, you'll use it often. So we have a static int parse int method that lives in the integer class. It converts s into an integer, into an int. This assumes that s holds the string version of an actual int. So for example, 123 becomes a 123. Make sense? Okay. So now, after this line, I have the int version of s. I've typed in however many text views I want. I've read it in as a string, and then I juiced that string and got an int out of it. Got it? All right. So now I have an int. It's stored inside of number of text views. So I want to now do something some number of times. How do I do something some number of times? If I want to repeat something a certain number of times, what kind of bells should be going off? For loop. So I'm going to say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than number of text views, I plus plus. So I'm going to do something some number of times. Now, what do I want to do? I want to create a text view and add it to the view group. That's what I'd like to accomplish, number of text views, number of times. Make sense? Okay, so what I'll go ahead and do is I'm going to create a text view. So I'll say text view TV is equal to, and it's going to want me to text view TV is equal to a new text view. Now, when you build a view, you build the view in terms of your current context. So my current context is this. That is the activity we are building this guy within. All right. So now I have a text view that knows how to live within the current context. He's not in the context yet, but he's capable of being. I want to go ahead and set his text. So I'm going to say tv.setText, and I'm going to set his text to text view. We'll put a little number sign maybe, and then we'll concatenate onto that guy I. So those would be text view 0, text view 1, text view 2, so on and so forth. All right. So I'm going to create a text view. I'm going to set his text, and then I need to add him to my view group. So I'll say this dot scroll view VG dot add view. Now notice here there's actually several different versions of add view here. The two that are going to be fairly common for us to use is either the default add view that just takes a view and we'll add it in the default way to that view group. So for a vertical linear layout, it'll always just add it to the bottom of the thing vertically. Alternatively, I can add index, and I'll show you this in a second. That allows me to specify where I want to put it. Okay, but I'll use this first one initially. So I'm going to go ahead and add my text view to my scroll view. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So read in from my edit text as a string, convert the string to an int, do something, that integer number of times, generate it, and what do I do each time? Generate a text view, set its text, add it to my scroll view. Make sense? So I've broken down in all those little pieces. That's what this function does. Who calls this function? This button. How do I know? Because I set his on click to be this button. Got it? So now when I run this, when I first come to that screen, I should have no text views because I haven't hit the button yet. No text views. So now I'll go ahead and set that to 16 just because. I'll hit generate scroll view. Now I have a bunch of text views. Now if I want to say 160 the next time, I can hit it again. And now I have even more text views. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
If I want to play around with the at-index version of this, because right now, notice it's building it, let me just hide the keyboard here. It's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, up to 15. And then I started over at 0 because I ran it a second time all the way up to 159.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to build it in reverse, I'll use my second version of add view and say add it at index 0. So that way it'll always add it to the index 0 of it, pushing everything else down. So now it'll build this in reverse. I'm not just naturally adding it to my vertical linear layout, letting it be the next thing on the bottom. I'm saying I am putting this at the very top at bucket 0. So whatever used to be at bucket 0 is going to get shoved down. Okay. So I'll say my 16 one again, and now it'll be 15, 14, 13, so on and so forth. So there's 15, 14, 13, so built in reverse. Make sense? All right, so now we can programmatically build things. Now we can be even more, we can do things even more interesting. Couldn't we, let's say I wanted this to have be a button. Could I have a maybe a text view like this and then have a button right next to it?
Mm-hmm.
And have that, maybe when you click that button, something occurs. Maybe that's like your way of selecting that row, something like that. There's kind of better ways of pulling that off in Android, but let's just say you want to do it this way. So I want to have each of these things in my view group. I want to have a text view followed by a button next to it. How would I accomplish that?
So then do you call a button inside?
Well, I'd have to build another button or build something else. Let's go ahead and do that. So now I can go ahead and I can say something like button B is equal to new button. And I build this using a context just like before. So whenever I build a view, I build it in terms of the current context. Then I can say b.set text, maybe just to say press me. Or if you want to, we'll make them unique. We'll say select, we'll concatenate I onto that. So it'd be select 0, select 1, select 2, so on and so forth. And then we'll go ahead and add it to our scroll view. And I'll go back to the normal version of this. So what do you expect to happen now?
Like text button, then button, and then text button, then button.
Yeah, all stacked on top of each other, right?
Then how do you add it horizontal?
I'm about to ask you that question. So ponder that for a second. We're proving that you're right here. So I'll do my little 16 thing here. I don't know why I keep picking 16, but I just do. And there's our text view button, text view button, text view button, so on and so forth. So then she's asked the rest of the group, how do I get those to be right next to each other? Who? Well, they're already vertical.
You have to add like another
vertical linear layout right next to the first one.
Okay, so you want another vertical one?
Yeah, so it's like there's two on the screen, one next to each other.
Okay, I think what you want to do, I think it's clear in your head what you want to do. You're just saying some really bad words associated with it. You want to have two things right next to each other, right?
Right.
What kind of view group allows us to accomplish that? What kind of linear layout allows us to accomplish things being right next to each other instead of on top of each other? A horizontal one.
I mean, I'm saying like two linear.
You want two things next to each other.
Right.
Okay, so if I was out here in my design,
Oh, well,
let's go out here to my design. Okay, and I wanted to have a text view and a button right next to each other. How would I accomplish that? Okay, so I'll go to my layouts. I'll go and get a horizontal linear layout. I'll toss that guy in there. And then I'll go ahead and I'll go to my text. I'll throw my text view inside. Oh, I need to give me a moment. Okay, so I put my horizontal linear layout inside of my scroll view, and then I'll throw my text view inside of that guy, and then I'll also throw a button inside of that guy. Put it in the other order. So that's what we want?
Right.
All right, so we want to, when we add something to our vertical linear layout, what do we want to do? We want to create a horizontal linear layout, and then we want to add a text view and add our button. We're already building our text view. We're already building our button. The piece that we're missing is we need to build a horizontal linear layout and add our stuff to it. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go back to the code. Now, if our vertical linear layout was represented as a view group, how do you think our horizontal linear layout will be represented? View group. All right. And go ahead and help me create this view group. So I'm going to say view group VG is equal to what?
New group context is what I guess.
And you are guessing right. Ooh, clicked the wrong thing. Oh, view group is technically, actually, we have not talked about abstract classes in here, have we?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Let me show this to you real quick, though. Okay, notice this guy's screaming right now. He's saying, if I highlight over it, it says view group is something that's called an abstract class, so you can't create an instance of it. So I'll just throw it into our notes. I probably won't test you over this. We'll talk about what we're going to test, but we'll see it plenty next semester. So abstract class. Well, let's just say abstract keyword. By making a class abstract, we force classes that inherit from it. Well, we force the programmer to make classes inherit from this class because we cannot create instances of abstract classes. If a class is defined as being abstract, we cannot create instances of it directly. We would indirectly create instances of it by creating instances of children of that class, which are, in this case, view groups, but might be a little bit more. Okay, so we're kind of saying a view group is too generic. Like we never actually have something called a view group. What we actually have are things called like linear layouts. So we can create an instance of a linear layout because a linear layout is a view group. That makes sense? But a view group is kind of too generic. A view group represents something that's on the screen and it's a collection of views, but it plays by some different rules. Okay? So let me show you this in documentation first. So we'll look up view group Android. And we'll see this guy is defined as an abstract class. Public abstract class view group. So the second you see abstract, you'll see that tells you right away, I cannot create an instance of view groups. I will have to instead create instances of things that are view groups. Now that doesn't mean you can't have a view group variable. And I'll show you what I mean here in a second. I can have variables of type view groups. We have one right now, right? It's called scroll view VG. That's an instant that holds an instance of something that is a view group. But what kind of thing did we build? The dude that we put in there is actually a vertical linear layout. That's what this guy is. Make sense? All right, so just for the sake of time here, I'm going to go ahead and say new linear layout. This is the context. So I'm allowed to do that. I probably should have called this a linear layout as well, but notice that I'm allowed to create a variable of type view group and put a linear layout in there. And then I can say something like view group dot, there's like a layout thing to tell it to be in horizontal. Let's go grab it real quick. Just orientation. 30 more seconds. So I'll change this guy to be a linear layout. And then I'll say vg.set orientation to linear layout dot horizontal. So now I have that horizontal orientation for that guy. So I can say vg.addView TV, vg.addView B, and then I'll add my view group to the scroll view VG instead of the individual two pieces. So create a horizontal linear layout, toss my two pieces in there, add the whole thing to the view group. So I run this, now we'll have both things in the view group. Make sense? All right, questions, comments, concerns, bribes. Okay, so for next class, review all the stuff from the slides. Make sure you come to class with any questions, any things you want me to cover again, make clearer. I will go through all the slides next class, telling you what I think will be on the exam, that kind of stuff. Otherwise, I will see you on Thursday. Remember, today, student, faculty, staff, Bible study, God, and Garage. Go to the cafeteria, sign in, get a free lunch, take it down to the terrace room, noon to 1.
Did you see my schedule?
Also, tonight we have Grace has an event over in S120. We're watching Imitation Game. I think I told you at the beginning of class, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Make sure you go to that.